Alright guys, MTech Guy here. Guys, it's the middle of winter, it's freezing. We've currently got the M5 on life support, keeping it fully charged up. Rightio, let's take a look under the bonnet, eh? Look at that for an engine, for crying out loud. You kidding me? Rightio, never mind about that. Guys, today we're going to be talking about scan tools and the ones that I like to use on my E60 M5. So this is going to apply to your M5 sedan, your station wagon, your M6 coupe or convertible. Now then, not all scan tools are equal. Some are much cheaper than others. There's different directions you can go with them. So to keep it simple, I'll break it down into 3 different groups. So you've got the most basic scan tools, the ones that are going to just give you them OBD2 codes, and then you can move on to a much better one that's going to be bi-directional. So that's going to give you the ability to operate certain solenoids and bits and pieces throughout the car. It might also give you the ability to run through a few diagnostic processes or initialize certain modules. And then moving on from the bi-directional scan tools, of course you've got the proper BMW diagnostic software. So we're talking about IMPA, ISTA. Now this is going to give you the maximum ability to properly diagnose your car. It's also going to give you some programming ability. And it'll also have a few workflow charts to send you in the right direction, the correct direction with your diagnostic. Now I often see a lot of enthusiasts talking about this software, saying that you can't get by without it if you own one of these cars, an E60 M5 or the equivalent M6. And also you can pick the software up super cheap on a disc or a memory stick. It's going to be way cheaper than buying a scan tool. Now that's all well and good, but first thing you've got to think about is you need a reasonably decent laptop to run the software on. Now, alright, you can buy an old cheap second-hand one, have it kicking around the garage, just keep it for the purpose of programming or using as a scan tool, that's fine, but you need a reasonably decent one. You're going to need a reasonable amount of memory. You're also going to need one that runs at about 2.4, 2.6 gigahertz. And it needs to be stable. It doesn't want to be shutting down on you halfway through diagnosing or programming either. So that's the first thing. Then the next thing, the problem is the software. Now you need to get a decent copy. There's many variations of it out there. Some are much better than others, and you need to get a decent copy, and then you've got to get it working on the laptop. Now that all sounds well and good, you know, shove the memory stick in or the disc, whatever, set it up, away you go. Well, it's not quite as simple as that. Most of the time you'll find that it's incredibly difficult to get the program working properly, and you have to go through quite a process to get it working properly. So if you're not very computer savvy, you're going to come up with a lot of difficulty with it. Alright, so you've bought yourself a half decent second-hand laptop, then you've got yourself the software, and you've finally got it working properly. Then you need to get a cable to connect the computer to the vehicle, and you need a decent one. Now there's many variations like the software, there's many variations of the cable out there. Some are much better than others. You can get cheap ones, you can get expensive ones, but finding one that's going to work properly is no easy feat. And then once you've been through all that, you've got the computer, you've got the software, and you've got a cable working properly, you've got the whole thing connected and working in sync together properly, then you've got to know how to use the program. So it's not just plug and play, it's not just like a basic scan tool. It takes a reasonable amount of time to become familiar with it. You can cause problems if you don't know what you're doing with it. So these are all things to think about. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, I've owned this car for just over 3 years now, about 3.5 years, and I've never used IMPA or ISTA once with it. I've never found the need. That's not to say I might not need it in the future, but so far I've got by without it, and it hasn't been a big deal. So as we're talking specifically about scan tools today, we're not going to get too involved with discussing IMPA or ISTA today. Okay, so you can get yourself a very basic scan tool. Now the really cheap ones, they're going to give you just generic OBD2 P codes. They're not going to give you the specific BMW code, so you're going to struggle to get by with one of them on one of these cars, to be honest. Now you might be able to diagnose misfire codes if you've got a faulty coil, something like that, but to be honest with you, it's worth spending a bit of extra money and at least getting a scan tool that's going to give you proper BMW fault codes. Now the basic scan tool that you've probably seen myself using in some of my videos is the Creator C310. Guys, I don't know if it's pronounced Creator, I don't know, who cares? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this will give you proper BMW fault codes, and you know what, you can get by so far with it. They're fairly cheap, and it's certainly one worth keeping in the boot of your car, especially if you're on a long journey. If you do encounter any problems along the way, plug her in and it's going to give you a rough idea of what's going on. I've found it very useful on other BMWs like E46s, my E87, especially some of the older ones. But when you're getting into the E60 territory, especially in M5, there's only so far you can go with it, but you can get pretty far with it, to be honest. So it's not a bad little scan tool, and it's certainly one worth having kicking around in your boot, if nothing else. Now, moving on from the basic scan tool, you want to be looking at getting a bi-directional scan tool. Now, this is the type of thing you want for one of these cars. I've got the Schwaben, I don't know if it's Schwaben or Schwaben. Guys, I don't know how to pronounce some of these brand names, but anyhow, this is an awesome little scan tool, and it's actually based on a Foxwell scan tool. Now, you can do a hell of a lot with this, and I think the programs in it are actually a watered down version of what you find in IMPA or ISTA, but you can not only read fault codes, you can actually carry out a VANOS test, you can initialize the clutch position if you've replaced your clutch, and it's going to give you all the information that you need to diagnose your S85 V10 or your SMG gearbox, as well as all the other modules throughout the car. It's an awesome little scan tool, very powerful, extremely good value for money. The one thing to keep in mind with this scan tool though is you can only update it using a Windows computer. So if you've got an Apple device, you're not going to be able to give it the latest version of its software. But to be honest with you, it comes pretty fully loaded out the packet, so that's not really been a problem for myself. Now, it is worth saying that I'm not affiliated with any of these brands. This is just my personal opinion. I'm just trying to put this information out there for you guys. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you find it useful. And I hope it gives you some reasonable information if you are looking to get yourself a decent scan tool for your E60 M5. Anyhow, guys, let's take a look at these two scan tools, the Creator C310 and the Schwaben scan tool. Let's plug them into the E60 M5 and take a closer look. Alright, so we've got the little Creator C310 hooked up now, and of course the E60 has two covers on the OBD port. But anyhow, let's click into this. So we've got diagnostic, I'll get it down to 5 series. The E60. If we go into driver. Now, the one thing I do find with this scan tool, it is reasonably quick to scroll through each page, scan the computer, look for codes, this type of thing, you know. So if you're in a hurry, if you just want to do a quick and dirty scan, see what's going on, this is pretty handy. We've got to read trouble codes, and of course, got no trouble codes. Now, if we go down to read data stream, and if we had the engine running, what this will do is give you multiple readouts of what's going on with the car and the engine. Of course, I've got coolant temperature, battery voltage, mass airflow readings, this type of thing, you know. So really handy if you're carrying out a diagnostic. Now, you're not going to be able to do any bi-directional things like this. You're not going to be able to operate anything from the scan tool, but to get an overall reading, it is pretty comprehensive. And then there's several modules around the car, so might be something associated with the chassis. So you've got your DSC bits and pieces here. You can read them codes too. That's all good. Alright, so there we go, the little C310. Not a bad little scan tool. Now, you're not going to be able to get too in depth with this one, but it is going to give you enough information just to get by on diagnosing faults with the car up to a certain extent. Now, this is a great little scan tool to have chucked in the boot of the car. So if you're away from home, you get an engine light on, something like that, this will more than likely give you enough information to give you an idea of what might be going on. So not a bad one to have chucked in the boot there, like I say. If you've got an E46, an E39, something like this, this is a fantastic little scan tool. But if you own an E60 M5, it's more than likely you're going to want to go a little bit further than what this can offer. So let's take a look at the Schwaben scan tool. Alright, so we've got the Schwaben scan tool hooked up now. Now, the one thing I will say about this scan tool is it does seem to drain the car's battery pretty quickly. So if you are going to use one of these, it is worth getting a decent battery maintainer or battery charger. Make sure that's hooked up, and you shouldn't have any trouble with it draining the battery while you're busy scanning for codes or whatever you're busy with the scan tool. So to start off with, you're greeted with the main menu screen here. We've got OBD2 scan option there, and we've got the specific BMW one, which we're going to be using today, obviously, and then a couple of other bits and pieces there. So we'll go into that. Now, it does have options for BMW, Mini and Rolls-Royce. Now, it does have a smart VIN option, so you can either enter the vehicle's VIN number manually, or you can scan the car's computer and it'll pick it up itself, and then what it'll do is it'll give you all the options that are available for this specific make and model. So we'll just scan for that now. So I've just decoded the VIN number now, and as you can see there's a few details of this specific model, and of course mine's a really early E60 M5. This was 7th month 2005, so nice and early. So we'll click yes for that one. Now, the one thing I have noticed with this scan tool that is worth mentioning is it does take a reasonable amount of time to load between each page, so you won't be doing anything in a hurry with this thing. Alright, so we've got 3 options here. We've got diagnosis, we've got service, and we've got special functions. So of course, if we go into diagnosis, we can do a quick scan. We can do a quick scan of the vehicle, see what fault codes are present. Alright, so that's the scan of all the modules completed now, and if we scroll through, you can see we've got a pass no fault on each one, so that's all looking good. So we go back, and as well as a quick scan, you can also scan each control module individually. If we go down to service, take a look in powertrain. So we've got the engine electronics and we've got the SMG transmission control unit. So if we take a look at SMG, now what you can do is carry out some test functions. So you can engage the gears with using the scan tool. So what you'd be doing is operating the hydraulics of the SMG unit to select which gear you want. So this is really handy if you want to force it into gear to carry out some testing. You can also check out the accumulator pressure. That's really handy for fault finding too. And if we go to service functions, some really cool features in here. So I've got replacement and repair. So say we go to clutch. So if we go to number 2 there, so what you can do, you can correctly initialize your clutch position if you've fitted a new clutch, or if you've done something like changed out the slave cylinder if it's been leaking. Very common problem on these. So what you can do, you can carry out a proper clutch replacement yourself, and then you can finish the job properly by programming everything correctly once you've finished without having to get it towed to the dealership. Take a look at hydraulics. Same here, you can carry out all the bleed procedures of the hydraulic pump, the hydraulic block. You can also depressurize the unit before you carry out any work, so super cool feature. Now if we go into engine electronics, it's got your Vanos ventilation down the bottom there. What you can do is carry out your Vanos bleed procedure. So if you've been in changing your Vanos solenoids, your Vanos solenoid O-rings, or just add them out to give them a clean up, once you get everything refitted, you can carry out a proper bleed procedure. You can deactivate your injectors. So if you want to do a compression test, you're not going to be squirting any fuel in the cylinders there. And then if we go into adjustments, adaptions, DME interface, and you can read or delete your adaptions. And engine exchange, you can reset your oil service intervals. And if we go into special functions down the bottom there, we'll just wait for the 10 years it takes for it to load. So we've got several features on here. So we go down, we've got the brake bleed. So if you do need to change out your ABS module, anything like that, and you've introduced air into the lines, you can carry out the proper bleed procedure to get all the air out of that ABS module. If we're going to battery, what you can do is register a new battery, and you can also set it up for what type of battery it is, whether it's an AGM one, what amp hours it is. So as you can see here, I've got a 90 amp hour AGM battery, and it was last changed at 121,000 kilometers. So we've got options here: enter battery exchange, the same capacity, so that's if you're changing it out for exactly the same. And you can either go higher or lower capacity. You can change it to lead acid or AGM. So you can do pretty much everything you need to do if you are changing out your battery, and for whichever type. If we go to diagnostic again, control modules, go to drive, engine electronics, we can go active test down the bottom there. If we go to live data and go to Vanos, now my engine's not running at the moment, but what you can do is do a Vanos solenoid check, so you can see exactly what's going on with each solenoid, so you can pinpoint if one's faulty, if one of the O-rings is leaking on one of them, this type of thing, you know. So this is invaluable for carrying out a proper Vanos diagnostic. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's some of the useful features of the Schwaben scan tool. It's got lots of other features too. Now this is a fantastic little scan tool, very powerful, and it's going to do pretty much everything that you need to do to maintain and look after your BMW E60 M5 properly. Now if you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW E60 M5 content and DIY videos. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.